Hey, I'm HeyWoah, longtime Magic player, Commander player, giving my feedback for Commander brackets. Remember, only watch this if you're Gavin Verhey. First of all, this is good. It looks so much better than the individual tiers of cards stuff showed off last year. I can tell a lot of thought and iteration went into it. Game Changers is also a neat way to ban cards from casual tables that are otherwise completely fine. The fatal flaw in a lot of the early feedback videos I watched fell into this trap instantly. Is the bracket and game changer system works very well for exactly half of what makes a deck okay or not okay for any given type of play, and I'm sure you know this. Synergy is, of course, the missing puzzle piece that accounts for arguably much more power than putting one Ancient Tomb in your deck, and it's one that Moxfield can't just check a list against 40 cards to give a rating on. Saying you built a feather deck that's technically bracket 1 but destroys casual tables is like a funny meme, but you called that out in the article as faux pas, plus bracket 4 is called optimized, and running an average mana value of 1.2 in a feather deck sounds pretty optimized to me. Still, it's better to have it spelled out somehow. And we're dealing with Magic players that have been trained for 30 years to laser focus only on things that have been litigiously defined. What can you do? I certainly don't know what kind of 2,000-word essay you'd need to write to codify and all the ins and outs of what constitutes levels of synergy if you're trying to draw a box around them. On that note, good luck. I promise the rest of my feedback is useful. I'm just saying I understand this is hard. Most important feedback here is going to be on philosophy, as I think the brackets are mostly well defined in that you and the council seem to have a decent idea of the target for each of the brackets, with one notable exception, and it's the bracket that I play in the most, so maybe I can help, and that is bracket 4, but we'll get to it. Bracket 1 seems good. I certainly never want to play a game like this. It seems miserable, but different people like different things. Not everything has to be for me, a fact that I wish more Commander players would come to grips with. Bracket 2 is a necessary and important tier that suffers greatly in the present, but has a strong potential future. Precons in general are famously awful, and saying the average modern precon is still a bit too nebulous. But moving forward, this is a product issue that I think can and probably will be fixed. I can imagine precons tightening up quality control from now on, maybe some more lands, maybe none of them coming into play tapped. Anyway, even printing the bracket on the box, and we all just collectively ignore how they used to be. I want to play Commander, so I buy a precon and you're in bracket 2, and then I upgrade it and now I'm in bracket 3. That's clean. It makes sense. And we can grow into that being mostly true. Bracket 3 is what I would call Commander. On one hand, yeah, I'm bracket 3 is the new my deck's a 7. That's a funny meme, but I look at it from the other side. What people are saying is that they tried to hit the Goldilocks zone, and the meme creeps in a bit when so many miss the mark, either up or down. Usually down in my opinion, but the intention is there, and I think we should all appreciate the thought. They're building on purpose not to be too good like bracket 4 or 5 while still being fun to play unlike bracket 1 and 2. That being said, if I'm sitting down for an average pickup game of Commander tuned with no precons and what I would easily call better than bracket 2, the most common question I am asked is if I have any infinites. 2-card wins, infinite or not, seem to be frowned upon, as are any extra turns. These things seem to be bog standard for my deck's a 7 Commander, and so I would shift those guidelines over one step, so there's less of a jump from 2 to 3 to preserve what in my experience reflects normal Commander expectations, and to better differentiate bracket 4 from CEDH. They are way too close together as written, even with the metagame stuff. I think 3 game changers makes about as much sense as any other arbitrary number. Let's keep it. Although I will quibble about certain cards being on the list, but I'll get to that later as it's kind of a bottomless pit of feedback. Also, I have probably a minor concern about how gamers' brains work. Everyone loads up Moxfield after the article comes out, sees that they can have up to 3 game changers, notices that they have 1, and instantly turns into Bilbo Baggins holding the ring. After all, why not? Why shouldn't I add another? I think we're going to see a lot of people hit the 3 cap just because there's a cap now subconsciously, on account of how people think. But maybe that's harmless. Synergy is way more powerful after all. Bracket 4 is where I think I can help the most. You got CEDH people on the team, and bracket 2 and 3 people on the team, and all the rest. But I suspect that you didn't have an advocate for this one, or maybe I'm just out of touch. It's possible I'm out of touch. But High Power Commander is what I play the most, so let's start with first principles to quote the article. Brackets 1, 2, and 3 are different levels of socially focused play. Brackets 4 and 5 are focused on higher power or even a competitive experience. Totally wrong. There are two types of commander: socially focused casual play and CEDH. Only CEDH is competitive, full stop. There's brackets 1 through 4, and then there's the Wall of Westeros, and then there's CEDH. The intent of CEDH is to play the format wrong on purpose by building the most competitive thing you can in what was supposed to be a non-competitive sandbox battlecruiser format. And that's fun when you do it with people who want that. You know the meme from Twitch chat about, how do I know if I'm bracket 4 or 5? If you have to ask, you're a 4? That's a funny meme, and it's true if a CEDH player is saying it. But I really want to stress that it's unfortunately also true in the reverse direction for what High Power Commander is supposed to be before this article. If you really aren't sure if you're a 4 or a 5, then you've gone way too far for 4. High Power Commander, or bracket 4 in this case, is not competitive. It's not bad CEDH decks built without a care for the metagame. It's the same socially focused, funny casual format stuff as 1 through 3. We're just playing with Portal 3 Kingdom cards and stuff banned in Legacy. We still are not trying to combo off on turn 4. We're just enabling stupider things. The commander adage of it doesn't really matter who ended up winning, it's about the cool stuff that happened during the game, is still very much in effect for what used to be power level 8. On the whole, they still don't want to play against Armageddon or Stasis or Thieves Auction because bracket 4 players are still casual players who are playing a casual format. If you fully optimize the best version of your deck, just without considering a metagame, then you've made a turbo combo deck with 0 protection and you'll pub stomp anything below CEDH in seconds. I'm seeing some high power commander players ejecting game changers from their lists to drop down into bracket 3, where they may be in real danger of pub stomping just so they, quote, don't have to play against the first 2 pages of the saltiest cards list. I feel like Scrambleverse and Ravages of War are for what they have always been for: your personal playgroup that finds humor in the annoyance of those playstyles. And I guess CEDH, where most of them are bad anyway. Pickup games are what the bracket system is trying to police after all, and the socially discouraged playstyles were that up until now, so I would reconsider this angle. The way 4 is currently written sounds like, oh, so you want a 4th game changer, then you must love turn 3 Thassa's Oracle. That feels a bit sudden. As for bracket 5, I don't play CEDH, so I'm not going to comment besides a pedantic nitpick. As per the article, quote, winning matters more than self-expression. Mark Rosewater is rolling in his empty grave at this misuse of the Spike psychographic profile. Winning is the self-expression, as is being known to play the game well. Also, there's still room for picking the colors or commander you like more and trying to prove that you can win with them, blah, blah, blah. Anyway. Overall, good work, pretty close. I would shift the non-GC, non-tutor expectations on all brackets to the right one step to smooth over the big jumps between 2 to 3 and 3 to 4, and to better align with what I feel is more the read of the room for pickup games, even high-power ones. CEDH really is its own animal. Anyway, let's get to the game changers, the easiest thing to endlessly fiddle with as far as commentary is concerned, but I'm going to throw my hat into the ring anyway because you asked for feedback. I'll do these in order until grouping them is more efficient. Draneth Magistrate is correct. If you shrug after looking at this guy and say, bro, just kill him with the removal you're running, what's the problem? You're already thinking in a bracket 3 mindset. You can't play your commander is pretty well against the spirit of the format and easily doesn't belong in 1 and 2 no matter how many Vojas and Pantlazes WotC accidentally prints. Enlightened Tutor I don't agree with, and this list has so many tutors in it that I might as well group all them up for my In Defense of Tutors monologue. Ahem. Putting tutors on the Game Changer list is redundant. They are already policed by the brackets, up to 3 in brackets 1 and 2. Do what you want in bracket 3 and 4. I think that's all the work you really need to do on it. You're getting a card as good as the deck you built, which is as good as the bracket you're in. The thing I most commonly hear is, they make every game the same. Do they? They mostly find removal when your back is against the wall from my personal experience. If homogenization is the true concern, then where are Worldly Tutor, Sylvan Tutor, Eldamri's Call, Green Sun Zenith, Finale, etc., etc.? Is the same creature on turn 3 every single game not homogeneous? Tutors don't make the game the same unless you want them to. That's a choice. In deck building and at the table, both. And I think that's a matter of taste. And it's one the choice of commander has 7,000,000% more impact on, obviously. Okay guys, here's my Krenko deck, no tutors. It's going to play way different this time. No, it's not. You're going to make 1,000,000 goblins, but maybe that's what you like. You get 3 opponents every game. There's your variety for a certain type of player. I think if you want to build Feather because you like the loop, that's not morally inferior to bribery tribal Gonti. Content creators that play 2,000 games of Commander per year can start to go a little stir-crazy, chasing variety as a virtue, but that's not everyone. And they put themselves in the desert that they're searching for an oasis in. Irrespective of power level or bracket, some people like the flowchart, and some people like Chex Mix. And some people like Chex Mix as long as they can tutor up a chili flavor first. It's fine. In bracket 1, you're casting Vampiric Tutor to find Shared Fate. Alright. Or Chaos Warp to not lose because it's literally the only removal spell in your whole deck. Bracket 2, finding your secret commander lets you start with your intended play pattern. I don't think homogenization quite enters into it yet. You just chose a different starting position. Let me get Norn the Wary out real quick, then whatever happens, happens. Bracket 3 is basically the same thing, except the cards in those categories are better, but it's still usually tutor for removal because you're about to lose. Although Bracket 3 is good enough to start having dedicated win cons to find late game. Perhaps this is where the homogenization complaints come from. Tired of seeing Craterhoof, that kind of thing. Hey, someone told me once, it's less about the win and more about the cool stuff that happened during the game. Game's gotta end somehow. And Bracket 5 is searching for Rhystic Study always. I'm only 30% joking. In conclusion, variety has a fuzzy definition, is a matter of taste and expression how important it is to you for your deck. It's not my fault there's 200 cards that give you guys haste, but only 1 Ozolith. Tutors are only as good as what they can find, and they're limited to 3 in lower brackets anyway. I wouldn't wish Diabolic Tutor on my worst enemy. Not even bracket 1 and 2 players deserve that. Thanks for listening to my TED Talk. Anyway, going down the list, Sarah's Sanctum is correct, easy add. Smothering Tide is also correct. If the GC list was only allowed 2 cards, this card would be on it, plus Rhystic Study. Trouble in Pairs draws a surprising amount of cards, but does scale a bit with the table power level, considering 4 puts it in striking distance to Consecrated Sphinx, but more castable during setup. I'd call Trouble a maybe, but I don't feel strongly enough to go to bat for it, so keep it there. Also, when are we getting a reprint without stolen artwork? Cards I'm surprised not to see in the white section. Teferi's Protection. I hear casuals complain about that card all the time, and it irks me how thoroughly it scoured the entire history of Magic rules to find every way that it can stop counterplay, and used all of them. Unless you're in blue. Esper Sentinel is a card I expected on this list, and I was ready to disagree with it being on the list, but you did not include it. Great job. That's right. In much the same way as Mystic Remora, the card's legit bad at low tables, but great the higher you go up. It's actually perfect how it scales so nicely. The card I'm most surprised not to see on the list is Farewell, but I'll talk about it in the blue section right now as we get to an ostensibly similar but actually much different card, Cyclonic Rift. Cyclonic Rift is an interesting one. It either wins you the game, or saves your life and then everyone redeploys because nothing was actually dealt with. And they get all their interest triggers back. Winning the game is fine, you gotta win somehow, and it's at least quick, there's no suffering. You just shuffle up for the next game. A salty card maybe, but I think I'm probably too bracket 4 pilled to understand how much bananas cost. I will go to bat a little bit here. For about 7 million casual players I've seen so far complain about Farewell, so probably it belongs here just as much as Rift. I much prefer simply losing to a Cyclonic Rift over someone casting Farewell to add another hour plus to whatever game has already gone long. How many of you have been in a long game, had a Farewell in hand, and just quietly didn't cast it because you kind of wanted it to be over, you could tell it would kill the vibe, and you wanted to get a third game in before you all went home? I took it out after that. I don't think there's a slippery slope here. It's exiling the graveyards that's really the nail in the coffin for never being able to crawl your way back from a Farewell. Expropriate, I was going to agree maybe. But then I read the article and now I don't agree because I don't agree with the reasoning. It says, quote, is strong enough to end some games on the spot. That's it. If a big splashy expensive win con goes on the list, then there is actually no excuse not to slippery slope into Tooth and Nail, Emergent Ultimatum, Crater Hoof, Time Stretch, Insurrection, Torment of Hailfire, Primal Surge, and on and on and on. There's no line in the sand. If that's all it takes, we either add another 20-some cards or take Expropriate off and say, well, if you pay like 9 mana with a bit of a board state, I mean, you gotta win somehow, right? Force of Will so doesn't belong to me that I feel like our philosophies might be not aligned. And maybe that's my problem, but hear me out. You skew your deck building to lean into enough blue cards to be able to spend 2 cards at a table of 4 people to counter 1 spell. That's terrible. I played this card in Legacy all day every day, even though it's card disadvantage because you had to or you'd die. And the big turns were so early that having mana up was often impossible. I think maybe it's easy to get blinded by the mana-free part of this card, that you can lose sight of what it is actually doing, which is countering 1 spell for 2 cards. Board looks the same. Along those same lines is Fierce Guardianship, which was also shocking to me. This card is free if your commander is out, only counters non-creature spells, and doesn't even give you 6 colorless mana next turn. You spend 1 card to counter 1 card, and then they both go to the graveyard, and then the game continues. Free shrugs. Most often used to protect your commander until you untap 1 time. Why is this a game changer? It can protect strong engines, sure, but how strong those engines are scales with the bracket it's used in, as does the turn you'll be meaningfully casting it. This is a 1-for-1 removal card on the stack. It's the Swords to Plowshares of counterspells. At least Deflecting Swat sets up brutal 2-for-1s or redirects a Time Stretch. This card counters 1 card. Focusing on being mana-free isn't exactly the powerhouse it is in 1v1 formats or CEDH. It's good, but free isn't good enough to change the game, in my opinion. Anyway, Rhystic Study, yes. Moving on. Thassa's Oracle, also yes. Although if you fleshed out the 2-card infinite lingo a touch, you could maybe encompass her in the bracket section and thus free up space here in the GCs. I also hear a lot of no 2-card win cons from lower power commander. I'm not saying I understand it, I'm just saying that's what I heard. Urza is pretty absurd. And even if you aren't going infinite, you're in danger of taking over the game, but that's true for a lot of commanders nowadays. I don't feel he's a shoo-in, but like Trouble in Pairs, I don't feel strongly enough to go to bat for him. Jin Gitaxias I've never seen at a public table in my life, because he's so obviously no fun for anyone but the caster. Or should I say, cheater into player. I guess we need to spell out a few more of those social don't do this things now that we're making brackets and GCs, so sure, put him in. Blue cards I'm surprised not to have seen, Mana Drain. It's the only counterspell I think has any reasonable argument to be on the list, certainly not Fierce and Force. If only to keep it out of 1 and 2, but I don't think it's worth limiting in bracket 3, that's my problem. And I think it's much more important not to stifle bracket 3 than it is to stop someone from playing a $100 card in bracket 2, as bracket 3 is where most people are going to live anyway, statistically. On black, Bolas's Citadel, sure no notes. Opposition Agent, agree, what a hateful card. I sure don't want to see it on the table even in bracket 4, but that's only because I'm trying to crack fetch lands over here. Turgid, yes. On that note, go ahead and unban Braids and put her here so everyone can rule 0 ask not to play against her as well. Ad nauseum easy, yes. Cards I'm surprised not to see in black, Necropotence. The meaningful downside of not being able to spend the cards on the turn you draw them is well noted, so maybe that's why. Otherwise, it very fits the description of other overwhelming resource advantage cards on the list, like Rhystic Study or Tithe. It only costs 3 even if the pips are hard, and the life does add up, but draw 7 every turn until you die is more than I can ignore for a game changer. On red, let me list the overwhelming resource advantage cards quick. Smothering Tide, tons of mana forever. Trouble in Pairs, tons of cards forever. Rhystic Study, tons of cards forever. The One Ring, protection for a cycle, and then tons of cards forever. Bolas's Citadel, win the game or at least play tons of free spells forever. And then there's Jeska's Will. Sorcery Speed Seething Song plus temporary kinda draw 3 one time, then it goes into the graveyard. One of these things is not like the others. The rest stay out, generating value forever, But Jeska's Will, while a stellar card and a very strong effect, is still just a one-time deal, with a bit of randomness to it. It's great, a staple in red decks for sure, but it doesn't overwhelmingly take over the game turn after turn. If it got onto the list due to the possibility of recurring it, then you have to draw those and cast those and resolve those, which you can do with most other strong cards. Or you could just do it with Underworld Breach, which is not surprisingly also on this list, and it definitely belongs. Cards I'm surprised not to see in red, none really on power level, but maybe Thieves' Auction, Scrambleverse, and other Chaos cards so miserable that I would probably scoop instead of roll 45 dice, or mix up everyone's cards and risk somebody walking away with a dual land in a similar colored sleeve. On green, Vorinclex is chilling in the gray area of Mana Denial, as you said in the article, and it's a reasonable take, and he's on here for that reason, so I agree. Gaia's Cradle, easy yes, no notes. Cards I'm surprised not to see in green, far and away Seedborn Muse. Take an extra turn during each opponent's turn is a pretty egregious hogging of the game time violation, and I would expect to see her just about only in bracket 4 games. Also surprising to not see is Craterhoof, considering how sick everyone says they are of seeing it, and since Expropriate is a game changer. But I don't think Expropriate should be a game changer, so I guess it's right to keep Craterhoof off it. Well, here we are. On multicolors, I'm not sure how I feel about calling out specific commanders, and so I don't have good feedback for this. The completely broken Commander Ninjutsu was the first one I thought of, so there's that. The Eminence ones maybe, Chulainn, Scythes, Kalia, Korvald, 6-mana Narset, Jetmir maybe, Voja for low tables. Yeah, see, too many are tumbling out now that I'm concerned it's too much. Augustin is probably right to keep out of 1 and 2 though. On colorless, all the fast mana, I agree, no notes. The One Ring, of course. I'm quite happy to see that it's here and not banned because I like casting my funny ring in bracket 4. Thanks for that one. Lion's Eye Diamond maybe doesn't need to be on the list because 2-card infinite combos are already policed in the bracket section, and there's virtually no other use case for the card besides arbitrarily looping it. Unless you don't count breach stuff as technically infinite, in which case it is deserved, so whatever the language says. Tabernacle probably gray area counts as land denial, although there's an easy way out, just let the creature die. And in general it does what Archfiend of Depravity does. Everyone keeps their 2 or 3 best creatures until someone destroys it or kills the person. I think worldwide this will never see a bracket 1 or 2 table, whether it's a GC or not, because it's $3,000. Which, combined with medium power level maybe, means it shouldn't be on the list. Anyone who actually owns this card knows what they're doing if they sleeve it up in good faith in a bracket 2, and so if they otherwise follow the spirit of the guidelines, it's probably fine. Trinisphere was a bit of a surprise, because it's like Esper Sentinel. I've cast Esper Sentinel at a low power table turn 1, and it drew me 0 cards for 4 entire turn cycles before it died. It scales with the power of the table and drops off quickly. Trinisphere is a bona fide lock piece in CEDH and a complete nothing burger in brackets whose average mana value is 3.8 anyway. It's about as much mana denial as Thalia, and usually less in brackets that limit GCs. So I don't know. Glacial Chasm and putting some respect on Crop Rotation's name. I agree that 1 and 2 probably shouldn't have to deal with this card, and higher brackets are more likely to just win without interacting with it, or strip mine it, or both. I'm surprised not to see Mox Opal on the list, as I think it's just better than dealing with the card disadvantage of Chrome Mox, artifact deck theme notwithstanding. Mox Amber tends to come out after your commander and thus shuts off easier, so I agree with its exclusion here. Looking forward to seeing Jeweled Lotus and Dockside back as GCs later this year now that we can keep them out of the brackets that were complaining about them, while also refusing to stop playing them. I'm pretty hyped. Well, that's it. Thanks for the beta test and especially for the article explaining all your thought process and reasoning that everyone seemed to not read. But I did, and I appreciate it. Shift each category's MLD, extra turns, and combos bracket guidelines 1 step to the right and build a wall between 4 and 5. Otherwise, good work. Thanks for watching. Buy a shirt, will ya?